It is a uniquely heartbreaking experience. You've been sitting at your desk for like hours or maybe even days at this point.
Oh yeah, pouring your absolute soul into a project.
Right, exactly. You're working on this design project.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a poster for a local band or like a high-end corporate brochure or something.
Or even a piece of digital art you plan to sell online.
Yeah, and you are looking at your bright, beautiful, high-definition monitor.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the image is just flawless.
Flawless. The blues are glowing.
Yes, the blues in the sky are practically glowing off the glass.
Mm-hmm.
The contrast in the shadows is razor sharp. The typography is so crisp.
You lean back and you're just incredibly satisfied you've created a masterpiece.
You really have. And then you hit the print button.
The infamous moment of truth.
It really is. You watch the paper slide out of the machine, right? The ink is still slightly damp. You flip it over expecting to see your masterpiece in the physical world.
But instead you are staring at a muddy, washed-out disaster.
It's the worst. Those glowing electric blues you spent hours on are now just this dull, depressing navy color.
And those sharp, dramatic shadows turn into heavy brown smudges that just completely obscure all the detail.
It is the absolute definition of frustration for anyone who is just starting out in their design career.
You immediately feel like your hardware just betrayed you.
Right, like you check your ink cartridges, you check your monitor cables, you start wondering if there's like a weird glitch in the software.
The reality is it isn't a glitch at all. It is a fundamental miscommunication.
Because we are dealing with two completely different languages of physics here. The physics of the screen versus the physics of the paper.
Exactly. And today we are going to completely demystify this translation error.
We really are. We are breaking down the absolute core concepts of professional design preparation for you.
The goal for this deep dive is to bridge that massive, frustrating gap between the glowing pixels on your display and the actual physical ink that gets stamped onto a page.
And to do this, we are using an incredible roadmap today. This deep dive is based heavily on a specific, really detailed resource.
It's Chapter 14, which is titled Producing and Printing Consistent Color.
Right, and that is from the book Adobe Photoshop CC Classroom in a book 2018.
And what is so fascinating here is that even though software interfaces update year after year, the buttons change and all that.
Sure, yeah, they move things around constantly.
But the foundational principles of color management and gamuts and print prep outlined in this specific chapter are absolute bedrock.
Because the laws of thermodynamics don't change, right? The physics of how light bounces off paper and the chemical properties of ink do not change just because a software app gets a dark mode update.
Exactly right.
Okay, so before we jump into the absolute weeds of color physics, a quick but super important note for you listening right now.
You definitely want to pay attention to this part.
You can actually get your hands on this exact source material so you can follow along, or just keep it on your desk as a permanent reference.
Highly recommend having the physical text nearby.
Yeah, so you can buy the book by scanning the QR code of the book link provided in the description below.
It is going to save you so many headaches in the long run.
It really will. And while you are down there navigating the description, hit that follow button. We explicitly request that the audience follow for more technical design breakdowns and career-building content exactly like this.
Because our mission is to take these dense, sometimes really intimidating technical manuals and translate them into actionable knowledge.
Knowledge you can use in your career immediately.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this. We aren't just going to talk about abstract color theory today.
Yeah, that gets boring too fast.
Yeah.
We need to ground this in a highly specific, practical scenario.
Exactly. The chapter sets up this fantastic project for us to work through. We are preparing a massive 11-inch by 17-inch travel poster for a Visit Paris campaign.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of a designer's day-to-day life, this file is just a perfect stress test.
It really is. It is not some simple flat vector graphic with like 2 colors.
No, it is a heavy, data-rich document. It's set at 300 ppi, which means pixels per inch. So we are dealing with a massive amount of visual information.
It's got multiple high-resolution photographic layers. I mean, there is a giant sweeping shot of the Eiffel Tower dominating the background sky.
And overlaid on top of that, we have a collage of smaller, highly detailed photos.
Yeah, like tourists posing.
Yeah.
The intricate stone facade of the Notre Dame Cathedral.
A classic French patisserie window filled with bright, saturated red tarts.
Oh, and a historical bronze statue, too, so you have wildly varying lighting conditions all mashed together.
You have different skin tones, intricate architectural textures, deep shadows, and bright, almost neon food colors all competing within a single document.
It's a lot. But I mean, if you can get this poster to print accurately, you can get almost anything to print accurately, right?
100%. But before we even open the file, the material gives us this brilliant, slightly terrifying technical trick right out of the gate.
Yeah, I love this part. Before you do any professional print prep, you have to ensure your digital workspace is actually telling you the truth.
Right, so the instruction is to start Photoshop, but immediately hold down a specific complex key combination.
On a Windows machine, you hold down Strat Alt plus Shift, and on a Mac, it is Command plus Option plus Shift.
You hold those keys down while the splash screen is loading, and the software interrupts you with a prompt.
It asks if you want to delete the Adobe Photoshop settings file. Which, honestly, why on earth is that step one?
It feels aggressive, right?
It feels incredibly aggressive to nuke all your customized settings just to open a poster file.
Well, think about how you actually use complex software over the course of a year. It's a highly customizable workshop.
Yeah, you move toolbars around.
Right. You might change the default color working space because you were doing like a quick web banner for a client 3 months ago.
Oh, I see. You tweak how your brush dynamics respond or alter the default grid measurements.
Exactly. You essentially leave little tools and scraps of customized data all over your virtual workbench.
And you just forget they are there.
You completely forget. And if you are embarking on a critical print job where absolute mathematical accuracy regarding color is paramount,
you simply cannot afford to have a rogue forgotten setting from an old web project subtly skewing your color profiles in the background.
restoring the default preferences is like hiring a cleaning crew for your workshop. It ensures the software behaves exactly as the developers originally intended.
Giving you a completely neutral, standardized baseline.
Because when you are dealing with professional color management, unknown variables are your absolute worst enemy.
That makes total sense. We need a sterile environment for this operation.
Completely sterile.
So we've reset our preferences, we have a clean slate, and we open up our massive Visit Paris poster file.
And the very first action we take is saving it as a working copy, naming it something like 14working.psd.
Just so we physically cannot accidentally overwrite our original pristine source data.
Right. And now we are entering the pre-press phase. I like to think of this as the pre-flight checklist.
Okay, the pre-flight checklist. Just like an airline pilot would never dream of pushing the throttle without checking the wing flaps right.
Or the hydraulics and the fuel mixture. A professional designer never sends a file to a commercial printer without verifying the structural mathematical integrity of the document.
Because you can't build a stunning color-accurate print on top of a flawed digital foundation.
You really can't. And the very first item on this pre-flight checklist is determining the final destination of the file.
Meaning, where is this thing actually going to live in the physical world?
The destination completely dictates the format and the parameters of the file you need to build.
Are you planning to print this yourself on a $200 desktop inkjet printer in your home office?
Or are you taking it on a thumb drive to a local corner print shop that uses a mid-range digital press?
Or is this file being sent to a massive industrial offset printing facility that uses gigantic chemical plate setters?
And why does knowing that matter right now before we've even looked at the colors in the sky?
Well, because every single one of those destinations speaks a slightly different technical dialect, right?
Exactly. If you are working with a professional service provider like a commercial printer, the very first phone call you make should be to their press department.
You have to actually call them up.
Yes, you ask them what exact file format do your machines prefer.
And let me guess, they don't just want a standard JPEG.
Rarely. They might ask for a native layered Photoshop file if they need to make adjustments on their end, but
more often than not today, industrial printers will request a file saved to a highly specific, standardized PDF format.
right, like PDF X1A or PDF X4.
And what do those actually do?
These standards strip out unnecessary interactive data and lock in fonts and color profiles in a way that industrial printing presses understand natively.
So if you just assume you know what they want, you might spend 5 hours meticulously prepping a file.
Only for their automated system to completely reject it because it's missing a specific data tag.
Wow. It's like spending hours writing a brilliant manuscript in French, only to find out the publisher only prints in German.
That is a perfect analogy. You need to know the physical realities of the destination first.
Okay, so once we know where it's going, we move to the next vital check, verifying the image resolution.
Right. Our poster file is built at 300 ppi.
PPI standing for pixels per inch, which is a measurement of data density within the digital file.
The more pixels you pack into a single inch of screen real estate, the more detail the file contains.
But 300 ppi seems to be this magic number that everyone throws around in the design world.
It is a solid professional starting point, absolutely. But the material also introduces a massive caveat here.
Right. It says the optimal resolution actually depends heavily on the halftone screen of the press and the grade of the paper being used.
Yes.
So what exactly is a halftone screen?
This is where we have to confront the mechanical reality of printing. A printing press does not operate like a photograph developing in a darkroom.
It cannot print continuous smooth tones of ink.
No, it can't. If you look at a printed poster under a microscope, you will not see smooth gradients.
You will see thousands of tiny, distinct, microscopic dots of ink separated by raw paper.
Yes. The illusion of a continuous image is just our human brains blending all those tiny dots together from a distance.
That's wild to think about.
And the halftone screen refers to the mechanical frequency of those dots, specifically how tightly they are packed together by the printing plates.
Okay, so a high-end art book might be printed on a press with a very dense halftone screen packing hundreds of dots into a small area.
Exactly, while a daily newspaper uses a very coarse halftone screen where the dots are spaced much further apart.
Which explains why newspaper photos look so rough and pixelated when you look closely at them.
Right, so if a press can only print a coarse, widely spaced pattern of dots, sending it a massive, dense digital file with 300 pixels per inch of data is entirely pointless.
The press physically cannot reproduce that level of detail. It will just discard the extra data.
And you've wasted processing power and file transfer time for absolutely nothing.
Okay, and what about the paper grade? Why does the actual physical paper change the digital resolution I need?
Well, paper is fundamentally a sponge. Think about taking a thick, wet, permanent marker and drawing a sharp line on a cheap, coarse paper towel.
The ink immediately bleeds outward. The sharp line becomes this fuzzy, thick caterpillar.
In the printing industry, that phenomenon is called dot gain. The physical ink dots expand as they are absorbed by the porous paper fibers.
Now imagine taking that same wet marker and drawing a line on a piece of ultra-smooth, coated, glossy photo paper.
The line stays perfectly crisp because the ink sits on top of the coating rather than soaking deeply into the fibers.
Ah, okay. So if you are printing a magazine ad on cheap, uncoated newsprint, the massive amount of dot gain means that the individual dots of ink are going to bleed outward and crash into each other.
Exactly. If you send a highly dense 300 ppi file to be printed on cheap paper, the press packs the ink dots tightly together, the paper absorbs them, they bleed into one solid puddle.
And your crisp photograph turns into a muddy, unrecognizable dark square.
Yes. So in that specific scenario, a lower resolution, like maybe 150 ppi, would actually result in a vastly superior, cleaner physical print.
Because you are intentionally leaving more raw paper between the ink dots to account for the bleeding.
You got it. This raises an important question that designers must always ask. What is the physical reality of my medium?
Designing for newsprint requires entirely different math than designing for glossy coated stock.
But for our Visit Paris poster, assuming we're using a high-quality glossy poster paper on a good commercial press, 300 ppi provides the exact right amount of data density.
To render the sharp lines of the Eiffel Tower architecture and the smooth gradients of the sky without turning into mud.
We are quite literally designing around the physical limitations of wood pulp and chemical dyes.
That perfectly sets up the next structural check, allowing for bleeds. Our poster is 11 by 17 inches, right?
Right. But the document instructions say that if any color is supposed to touch the absolute edge of the final poster, we have to extend the digital canvas.
By 1/4 of an inch on all sides.
Yes. The concept of the bleed is a mechanical necessity that trips up almost every single beginner designer.
Usually with disastrous and expensive results.
Oh yeah. Let's visualize the print shop floor for a second. When you order a batch of 11 by 17 inch posters, the commercial printer does not feed perfectly cut 11 by 17 inch sheets of paper into their massive presses.
Because that would be incredibly inefficient and mechanically difficult to align at high speeds.
Right, commercial presses print on massive sheets of paper or continuous rolls. They might print 4 or 8 copies of your poster onto one giant sheet.
And after the ink dries, that giant sheet gets wheeled over to a finishing station.
Where it is placed under a massive hydraulic mechanical guillotine.
Just a heavy steel blade coming slamming down, slicing through hundreds of sheets at once.
Trimming them out of the master sheet down to the final finished 11 by 17 size.
But here is the physical reality we have to design for. That giant steel blade slicing through an inch-thick stack of paper is not perfectly mathematically precise down to the absolute micrometer every single time it draws.
No, it's not. The paper stack might shift a fraction of a millimeter. The blade itself might have a microscopic deflection.
The mechanical alignment guides might be off by the thickness of a human hair.
So imagine you ignored the bleed instruction. You designed the beautiful blue sky of your Paris poster to stop exactly mathematically at the 11-inch mark on your digital canvas.
And let's say the guillotine blade shifts slightly outward during the cut.
When you pull your poster out of the stack, you will see a tiny glaring sliver of unprinted raw white paper running down the entire edge of your beautiful premium artwork.
Oh man, that instantly destroys the illusion. Makes the poster look like a cheap amateur mistake.
It really does.
Yeah.
So to prevent this, we intentionally build a bleed. We expand the canvas.
We don't just stretch the digital file editor, right? We actually design the blue sky graphics to extend out to 11.5 by 17.5 inches.
Right. We intentionally print beautiful blue ink past the boundary where we know the blade is supposed to fall.
By extending the art outward, you create a margin of error for the physical machinery.
When that guillotine blade comes crashing down, even if it shifts slightly left or right, it is guaranteed to cut through solid blue ink.
Ensuring flawless edge-to-edge color on the final trimmed piece.
It's fascinating how much of digital design is actually just anticipating the clumsy physics of heavy machinery.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so our resolution is dialed in, our bleeds are built. The next phase of the pre-flight check is what the material refers to as the zoom test.
It sounds almost aggressively simple. You have all your structural settings in place. Now you select the magnifying glass tool in Photoshop, you zoom in extremely close, and you just look at the image.
I mean, it sounds like something a child would do, not a professional pre-press technician.
Yeah.
Why is manually panning across an image at 200% magnification a required step?
Because software lies to you.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. When you are looking at an 11 by 17-inch poster scaled down to fit entirely on your 15-inch laptop monitor, you are not seeing reality.
What are we seeing then?
The software is actively performing a process called anti-aliasing. It is mathematically blending and smoothing the pixels so the image looks pleasant and continuous at a zoomed-out level.
So it is actively hiding the flaws.
It is hiding the digital noise that might be lurking in the deep shadows of the Notre Dame photo.
Wow.
It is hiding the fact that you might have accidentally over-sharpened the intricate metal lattice of the Eiffel Tower, leaving ugly white digital halos around the edges.
Or hiding stray pixels from a poorly executed background removal on the statue layer.
Exactly. And when you send that 300 ppi file to an industrial plate setter, the printer doesn't anti-alias anything.
It mercilessly and perfectly reproduces every single hidden flaw, blowing them up to their actual physical size.
Yep. The zoom test is mandatory quality control. You zoom into 100% or 200% where one digital pixel equals one screen pixel.
And you methodically pan across the entire document row by row like you were mowing a lawn.
Exactly like mowing a lawn.
I look at it like proofreading a billboard with a magnifying glass. You aren't looking at the big picture anymore. You are hunting for typos in the mathematical data.
You are looking for a stray dust mark from a scanned asset. You are looking for weird color banding in the sky gradient.
Because if you catch a stray black pixel hovering in the white text, now it takes 2 seconds with the eraser tool to fix.
But if you catch it after 1,000 copies have been printed, you have a very expensive crisis on your hands.
Absolutely. Now, regarding this pre-flight workflow, our Paris poster is incredibly complex.
Very complex.
It has the text layers, the sky layer, the individual tourist photos, the adjustment masks.
Right.
My natural instinct as someone terrified of messing up the file before sending it away would be to just flatten the entire document.
Just crush it all down.
Yeah, just crush all those delicate layers down into one single unchangeable background layer, lock it down so nothing can accidentally shift during file transfer.
And you know, for a very long time in the early days of desktop publishing, that was the gold standard advice. Flatten the image, simplify the math, minimize the file size, and send it out.
But not anymore.
No modern prepress workflows have evolved significantly, and the material explicitly advises against premature flattening.
It dictates that you should keep the image in its original color space and preserve your layers for as long as absolutely possible.
But why? Wouldn't a flattened file be mathematically safer for a printer to interpret?
Well, it's about maintaining flexibility within a modern, interconnected software ecosystem.
Most commercial posters, magazines, and brochures are not sent directly from Photoshop to the press.
Right, the Photoshop file is usually placed into a dedicated layout application like Adobe InDesign where the typography margins and multiple pages are managed.
And InDesign and Photoshop talk to each other.
Very deeply. InDesign is brilliant because it doesn't just treat your Photoshop file as a dumb flat picture. It can actually read the underlying architecture of the PSD file.
It can recognize the individual layers you built in Photoshop from within the InDesign interface itself.
Oh well, let's trace the logic on that. So if I place my unflattened Photoshop poster into an InDesign layout, and the art director looks at it and says, you know what, the Visit Paris text layer is clashing with the magazine's barcode.
If you had flattened the file, you would have to open Photoshop, dig out the original unflattened version, hide the text layer, save a new flattened version, go back to InDesign, and relink the file.
You've baked all the ingredients into a cake, and you can't easily extract the eggs once it's out of the oven.
But because I preserved the layers.
The production team can simply right-click the image inside InDesign, access the object layer options, and turn off the visibility of the Visit Paris text layer right there in the layout program.
That is incredibly efficient.
Preserving layers grants the downstream production team the ability to make critical micro-adjustments without throwing the file all the way back up the pipeline to you.
The golden rule is always consult your specific production team's requirements first, but generally maintain maximum flexibility until the absolute final output stage.
Okay, the pre-flight check is complete. The foundation is rock solid. The file is sized correctly, bleeds are accounted for, we've scrutinized the pixels with the zoom test, and our layers are safely intact.
Now we have to pivot. We have to talk about the language those pixels are using.
We've looked closely at the data, but we need to understand how that data actually communicates color to human eyes.
We are transitioning from structural file prep into the deep physics of color models.
This transition is the crux of the entire muddy print nightmare you described at the very beginning of our deep dive. Understanding this solves the mystery.
We have to understand the fundamental war between RGB and CMYK. Let's start with RGB.
The text explains that a vast percentage of the visible color spectrum can be represented by mixing red, green, and blue light.
Emphasize the word light in that sentence. The RGB model is the language of emission. It is the language of screens.
Your laptop monitor, your smartphone, your television, the digital billboard on the highway.
The display you are looking at right now creates color by literally emitting photons. It pushes light out through microscopic red, green, and blue phosphors or LEDs directly into your retinas.
This makes RGB an additive color model. Let's unpack additive. Imagine I have 3 incredibly powerful theater spotlights in a massive pitch black room.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
One spotlight has a pure red bulb, one has a pure green bulb, and one has a pure blue bulb.
This is a classic physics demonstration.
If I turn on the red spotlight and aim it at a dark wall, I see a circle of red. If I turn on the green spotlight and overlap it slightly with the red circle where the 2 beams of light mix on the wall, I don't get a muddy brown, I get a bright, pure yellow light.
And if I aim all 3 spotlights, red, green, and blue, at the exact same spot,
You get a beam of pure, blinding white light.
because it is additive, you are literally adding light energy to the room. The maximum mathematical amount of RGB values equals pure white.
And the total absence of light energy turning all the spotlights off equals pitch black.
And because you are firing photons directly into the viewer's eyes, the RGB color model is capable of producing incredibly vibrant, saturated, glowing colors.
Think of the neon signs in a cyberpunk movie. They are pure emitted energy. That is exactly why your digital poster looks so stunning and vibrant on your monitor. It is literally a light source.
Okay, that makes perfect sense for a screen. But unless things have gotten very strange in the paper industry lately, paper does not glow. It doesn't emit photons.
Paper is an entirely passive medium. It possesses no energy of its own. It can only reflect the ambient light that already exists in the room where you are standing.
And because of this physical limitation, we require a completely different color model to reproduce images on paper, the CMYK model.
Which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and well, we'll get to the K in a second. The material describes CMYK not as additive, but as the subtractive color model.
It's based on the light-absorbing quality of physical ink. Let's trace the path of light to understand why it's subtractive.
You start with a blank white piece of paper. The ambient light in your room, which if its white light contains every color of the rainbow, hits that piece of paper.
Because the paper is white and blank, it reflects all of that light spectrum back into your eye. Your brain processes that full reflection as the color white.
But the moment we apply ink to that paper, we change the physics of the reflection.
Exactly. Physical ink acts as a chemical filter. If the printing press lays down a thin layer of cyan ink on the page, That specific chemical compound is designed to absorb or subtract the red wavelengths out of the ambient white light hitting it.
The ink traps the red light and only allows the blue and green wavelengths to bounce off the paper and reach your eye. Your brain perceives that specific mixture of reflected light as the color cyan.
It's subtractive because the ink is literally taking energy away from the reflection. It is acting like a sponge for specific colors of light.
So following this physical logic, if I have a white piece of paper reflecting all light, and I mix a massive thick puddle of cyan, magenta, and yellow ink all together in the same spot.
The cyan ink absorbs the red light, the magenta ink absorbs the green light, the yellow ink absorbs the blue light.
So if all the light is being absorbed by the three inks, nothing bounces back to my eye. I should have just created a perfect black hole on the paper that absorbs absolutely all light. Pure, infinite black.
In a theoretical vacuum, using perfectly pure mathematical chemicals, yes, you would achieve absolute black. But here is where the theory crashes into the messy reality of industrial manufacturing.
We do not print with pure mathematics. We print with wet physical ink, manufactured in huge vats in chemical plants.
And the text points out a harsh physical reality. All commercial printing inks contain microscopic impurities.
So what actually happens when you mix 100% cyan, 100% magenta, and 100% yellow ink on a printing press?
Those chemical impurities clash with each other. Instead of absorbing all the light perfectly, they reflect some of it back in chaotic ways.
Instead of a crisp, deep, beautiful black, you get a murky, muddy, dark, brownish-gray sludge. It looks terrible.
Not to mention the physical problem of dumping that much wet ink onto a single spot on the paper.
Right, if you saturate the paper fibers with 300% ink coverage, the paper will warp bubble and potentially tear right inside the press.
So to get actual usable black shadows and crisp text,
the printing industry had to add a completely separate fourth ink to the press, a dedicated, highly pigmented black ink.
This fourth ink provides the deep, satisfying shadows, the sharp typography, and the structural contrast that mix and CMY alone simply cannot chemically achieve.
And this dedicated black ink is represented in the acronym by the letter K, which always confused me. Why not use B for black?
Because B is already taken by blue in the RGB model. Using B for black would cause endless confusion in software engineering and print shops.
That makes sense.
In the historical tradition of the printing industry, the black plate is known as the key plate. It holds the most crucial outlines, the fine details, and the contrast structure that all the other color plates must perfectly align or register to. Therefore, K stands for key.
CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and key. The process of combining these four specific chemical inks and varying dot patterns to reproduce the illusion of a full-color photograph is known as four-color process printing.
And this fundamental physical divide, the difference between emitting active light energy and absorbing passive light energy, is the root cause of the muddy print mystery.
Which transitions us perfectly into the consequences of this divide. The gamut problem.
Now that we know RGB and CMYK are completely different physical languages, we have to ask a terrifying question. What happens when a color simply gets lost in translation?
To understand the scope of the problem, we first have to define what engineers mean when they use the word gamut.
The text defines a gamut as the specific range of colors that a particular device or color model is physically capable of reproducing.
Think of a gamut like the range of a musical instrument. A grand piano has an incredibly wide gamut. It has 88 keys. It can hit thunderous deep bass notes and piercing high treble notes.
A flute, however, has a much narrower gamut. It can only play notes within a specific higher register. You physically cannot play a deep bass line on a flute.
So in this analogy, the RGB screen is the grand piano.
Exactly. Because RGB utilizes emitted light energy, its gamut is massive. It can easily reproduce the electric neon blues, the blinding hot pinks, and the vibrant glowing greens that you might capture with a high-end digital camera sensor.
But the CMYK printing press is the flute.
Yes, CMYK is fundamentally restricted by the chemical limits of ink absorbing light on white paper.
There are thousands of colors that exist in the real world and that exist perfectly in the RGB digital space that are simply physically impossible to manufacture using only cyan, magenta, yellow, and black ink.
Those impossible colors are referred to as being out of gamut.
So let's look at our Visit Paris poster. We might have this gorgeous, vibrant, almost neon blue sky behind the Eiffel Tower, or maybe some bright red reflections in the patisserie window.
They look flawless on the grand piano of our monitor. But if
Yeah.
we try to force the printing press to print them,
The printing press essentially looks at the data and says, I literally do not possess the chemical ink required to make this neon blue.
and if you, the designer, do not manually manage that translation problem yourself, what happens?
The color management software will do it for you automatically when you save the file for print.
The software mathematically analyzes that glowing neon blue, realizes it is completely out of bounds for CMYK, and arbitrarily snaps it to the closest printable dull navy blue it can find inside the CMYK gamut.
And it doesn't care about your artistic vision, it just brutally forces the color into a box. And that is exactly how you get the muddy disaster. You surrender control of the translation to an automated algorithm.
Professional print design is entirely about maintaining control of the math. We need a way to know exactly which pixels are out of gamut before we ever hit print, so we can gracefully and artistically adjust them ourselves rather than letting a dumb machine crush them.
And thankfully, Photoshop has a specific diagnostic tool engineered exactly for this purpose. It's called the gamut warning.
It is an absolute lifesaver for print designers. You simply navigate to the View menu at the top of the screen and select Gamut Warning.
The material walks us through using this tool,
Yeah.
but it also highlights a truly baffling quirk about how Adobe originally designed the interface for this feature.
When you activate Gamut Warning, Photoshop rapidly analyzes the math of the image and places a solid color overlay on top of every single pixel that is physically impossible to print in CMYK.
It creates a visual map of the danger zones.
It's a great concept, but the default warning color that the software engineers chose to highlight these danger zones is a neutral medium gray.
Which is an incredibly bizarre, almost self-defeating choice from a user experience perspective.
Here's where it gets really interesting, or maybe just really frustrating. Let's unpack this logic. We are looking at a poster featuring the Eiffel Tower, a massive structure made of gray iron.
It's surrounded by gray cobblestone streets, gray clouds, and complex shadows. And the software decides to highlight the problematic impossible colors by turning them gray.
The warning completely camouflages itself within the photograph.
It is practically invisible on 90% of architectural or landscape photography. You find yourself squinting at the screen, toggling the warning on and off, trying to spot which gray pixels are part of the building and which gray pixels are warning you of an impending print disaster.
Thankfully, the text provides a brilliant, simple workaround to hack the interface and make the warning system actually function.
It instructs us to go into the Edit menu, down to Preferences, and click on a section called Transparency and Gamut.
And right there in that dialog box, you have the option to change the gamut warning color.
You click on the little gray square, and it brings up a color picker. The book suggests changing it to something totally obnoxious, something that absolutely clashes with the aesthetic of your image. A vivid purple or a bright radioactive green.
You want to choose a color that cannot possibly exist naturally in your specific photograph. I always set mine to a blinding pure magenta. It completely ruins the beauty of the image while I'm working, but that is the entire functional point.
Exactly. You click OK, and suddenly the poster transforms. Splashes of radioactive neon green appear clustered all over the brightest parts of the blue sky, and maybe they coat the vibrant red tarts in the patisserie photo.
It instantly visualizes the exact microscopic problem areas. Every single pixel glowing green is a pixel that will fundamentally break during the printing process.
It shifts the problem from being an abstract mathematical concept in your head to a highly visible, targetable enemy on your screen. You can literally see the physical boundaries of the CMYK color space mapped out dynamically over your RGB data.
Okay, so we've hunted down the rogue colors with our neon green radar system, but we also remember from our zoom test earlier that we had some structural problems.
The photo of the tourists looked flat, lacking contrast, and generally muddy. Now we are entering the phase where we actually have to fix the flaws. We have to roll up our sleeves and manipulate the image data directly.
We have diagnosed the various illnesses in the file. Now it is time to perform surgery. And crucially, we're going to use adjustment layers to execute these fixes non-destructively.
Let's clarify non-destructive editing. It means we are not permanently rewriting or destroying the original pixel data of the photographs.
We're essentially placing a clear piece of glass on top of the photo and writing a set of mathematical instructions on that glass, a filter that alters how the underlying pixels look to our eye without actually changing the pixels themselves.
If we make a mistake, we just throw the glass away.
Which perfectly ties back to our earlier mandate about preserving flexibility in a professional workflow. You always want a path backward.
Let's tackle the muddy photos first. In our poster's collage, the photo of the tourists looks like it was shot on a dreary, overcast day. It lacks pop.
The text instructs us to select the torus layer in our Layers panel and then add a Curves adjustment layer above it.
Curves is arguably the single most powerful, granular tonal adjustment tool in the entire software ecosystem. It maps the input levels of light in the original image to the output levels on a bendable graph.
But if we just apply a Curves adjustment layer right now, we run into a major structural problem. If the Curves layer sits on top of the layer stack, its mathematical filter will pour down through the entire document.
It will change the contrast of the torus, yes. But it will also alter the Eiffel Tower, the text, and every other photo underneath it.
It's a shotgun blast when we need a scalpel. We only want to fix the tourists.
So we have to constrain the effect. We click a tiny button at the bottom of the Properties panel that looks like a square with a downward pointing arrow next to it. Clicking this creates what is known as a clipping mask.
A clipping mask is a structural command. It forces the adjustment layer to apply its mathematical changes only to the single pixel layer directly beneath it in the stack.
It isolates the surgical strike completely. The rest of the poster remains perfectly insulated from the changes.
I love the elegance of that. So our Curves adjustment is safely clipped just to the tourists. Now, how do we actually cure the mud?
The book uses a very specific automated technique here. In the Properties panel for the curve, there are 3 tiny icons that look like eyedroppers. A black one, a gray one, and a white one.
These are the black point, gray point, and white point calibration tools. They exist to tell the software's algorithm what specific part of the messy photograph should be mathematically defined as absolute shadow-neutral midtone and pure blown-out white.
The instructions tell us to select the white point eyedropper and then physically click on a light area of the stone building in the background of the tourist photo.
Think about the logic of what you are doing in that moment. You are calibrating the light of the entire image based on 1 pixel.
You are pointing your tool at a pixel that currently looks like a dull, muddy light gray, and you are commanding the software. Do you see this specific pixel? I want you to recalculate the math of this entire image so that this specific pixel becomes pure 100% white.
And when the software obeys, it doesn't just change that 1 pixel. It takes the entire tonal range of the photo, all the shadows, all the midtones, and stretches them out proportionally along with the new white point.
The highlights get drastically brighter, the midtones shift upward, and instantly the whole photo pops off the page. The muddy, overcast veil is completely lifted just by defining what white should actually be.
It is an incredibly fast, highly effective technique for rescuing flat, underexposed images without having to manually draw complex curves.
It's like wiping a dirty layer of grime off a window. Okay, next up is the photo of the historical bronze statue. The material notes that this photo also appears flat and lacks dimensional contrast, but instead of using curves, it instructs us to use a levels adjustment layer.
Levels is essentially Curves' slightly more rigid, straightforward cousin. Instead of manipulating a bendable line on a graph, you are interacting directly with a histogram.
Let's really break down what a histogram is because it looks incredibly intimidating to new designers. When you open Levels, you see this black graph that looks like a jagged mountain range. What am I actually looking at?
A histogram is essentially a bucket sorting machine for data. Imagine every single pixel in your photograph is a tiny marble. Now imagine you have 256 buckets lined up in a row.
The bucket on the far left represents pure, absolute black, a value of 0. The bucket on the far right represents pure blinding white, a value of 255. All the buckets in between represent every shade of gray from dark to light.
So the software looks at every pixel in the photo, determines how bright it is, and drops it into the corresponding bucket.
Exactly. The jagged mountain range you see on the graph is simply showing you how full each bucket is. If there is a massive spike on the left side of the graph, it means the image has a ton of dark shadow pixels.
If the graph is entirely flat on the right side, it means there are absolutely no bright highlight pixels in the image at all. It is a visual X-ray of the photo's exposure data.
So we select the statue layer, add a levels adjustment layer, clip it to the statue just like we did with the torus, and we look at the mountain range. But before we touch a single slider, the text introduces a massive expert pro tip that most self-taught designers completely miss.
It is a microscopic, easily overlooked technical detail that fundamentally impacts accuracy.
The text says, look at the top right corner of the histogram graph. If you see a tiny icon that looks like a warning triangle with an exclamation point in it, you must click it. The button is called Calculate a More Accurate Histogram. Why do we need to ask the software to be accurate? Doesn't Photoshop just inherently know what the graph looks like?
It does, but we have to remember how software engineering works. Photoshop is constantly fighting a war between mathematical accuracy and user interface speed. Analyzing the precise luminance value of 20 million individual pixels takes significant processing power.
If the software did that every single time you zoomed or moved a layer, the program would lag and stutter constantly.
It would feel slow and broken. So to keep the interface feeling snappy and responsive, Photoshop takes a shortcut. It often displays what is known as a cached histogram. It does a rapid, low-resolution scan of a fraction of the pixels and generates a rough estimated mountain range.
Meaning the graph you were looking at is essentially an educated guess, not the exact mathematical reality of the file.
Right. And if you are just applying a quick Instagram filter, a cached histogram is fine. But if you are in a professional Caprice environment preparing to make highly precise color adjustments based on exactly where a specific spike in the data falls, you cannot base those decisions on an estimate.
You need the absolute truth. Clicking that little warning triangle forces the software engine to pause deeply, scan every single pixel in that specific layer, and redraw the graph with 100% mathematical accuracy.
It ensures you are performing surgery based on an accurate MRI, not a blurry Polaroid. I love that detail.
So we click the warning icon, the graph redraws itself slightly, and we see the true mountains of data.
Directly beneath the graph are three little triangular sliders.
Yeah.
A black slider on the far left for controlling shadows, a gray slider in the middle for midtones, and a white slider on the right for highlights.
To increase the contrast of a flat image, the general theory is to drag the black shadow slider inward toward the center to force the darks to become darker, and drag the white highlight slider inward to force the light areas to become brighter. The book doesn't just leave us guessing, though it gives us highly specific numerical values to punch into the input boxes beneath the sliders. For the shadow input, we type in 31. For the midtones, 1.60. And for the highlights, 235. What is the math actually doing when we type those numbers?
Let's translate those numbers back to our bucket analogy. The scale goes from bucket 0 black to bucket 255 white. When we move the black input slider from 0 up to 31, we are issuing a mathematical command to Photoshop.
Take all the pixels that currently live in bucket 31, which are currently just a dark, muddy gray, and aggressively crush them all the way down into bucket 0, making them pure, absolute black.
We are deepening the foundation of the shadows. Any pixel darker than 31 just becomes pure black.
Exactly. And on the other end, moving the highlight input from 255 down to 235 issues the opposite command. Take the pixels in bucket 235, which are very light, dull gray, and stretch them all the way up to bucket 255, making them pure white.
You are squeezing the ends of the tonal range closer together, which expands the contrast of all the midtone pixels caught in between them. By applying those specific numbers, the bronze statue goes from looking like it was photographed through a hazy fog to looking like it has dramatic, punchy directional lighting.
It gives the two-dimensional pixels a sense of three-dimensional volume. We have successfully rebuilt the tonal foundation of the images.
Which brings us back to our final and most dangerous flaw, the radioactive green spots clustered all over our sky, the out-of-gamut colors. We have to figure out how to fix those impossible neon blues without ruining the surrounding colors in the poster that are perfectly fine.
This requires a very delicate, highly targeted approach.
The workflow the book outlines is brilliant. A beginner might just grab the paintbrush tool and try to manually paint over the green spots with a duller blue, or they might just slap a saturation adjustment layer over the whole image and drain the color until the green disappears.
But that second method would aggressively drain the vibrant reds from the patisserie tarts and the rich tones from the stone buildings just to fix the sky. We need a way to target only the problem pixels.
You need to generate a surgical mask based on mathematical properties, not manual painting.
So we ensure our main poster layer is selected. Then we navigate up to the Select menu at the top of the screen and choose Color Range. This brings up a powerful dialog box.
Yeah.
At the top of this box is a drop-down menu labeled Select.
And this is where the magic happens for pre-press.
You click that drop-down, and instead of choosing reds or blues, you choose a specific command out of gamut. You literally instruct Photoshop's algorithm to analyze the ICC profile, identify every single pixel that the printing press is going to choke on, and select only those pixels. You click OK.
And instantly, all those areas that were glowing radioactive green are now surrounded by active selection borders, the classic Photoshop marching ants.
Yes, the little animated dashed lines crawling around the sky. We have successfully isolated the disease. The marching ants are surrounding only the impossible blues. But the material suggests a fascinating psychological trick at this exact moment. It tells us to go to View Extras to actively hide the selection borders.
The marching ants are incredibly useful for knowing what is selected, but they are visually chaotic. They crawl around the screen constantly flickering, which makes it nearly impossible for your human eye to accurately judge subtle 1% shifts in color and contrast within the selected area.
Hiding them, while keeping the mathematical selection fully active in the background, removes the distraction and allows your visual cortex to focus purely on the pixels.
It's like turning off a flashing strobe light while you're trying to read a fine print document. So the selection is mathematically active but invisible to us. Now we click the hue saturation icon in the adjustments panel to add a new adjustment layer.
And because we had an active selection running in the background at the exact moment we created the adjustment layer, Photoshop's logic engine automatically converts that selection into a layer mask attached to the hue saturation adjustment.
Let's explain masks. A layer mask is essentially a stencil. It's a grayscale image attached to the layer where black conceals the effect and white reveals it. Because Photoshop used our out-of-gamut selection to make the stencil, the mask is solid black everywhere except exactly where those impossible blues are.
In those spots, the mask is white, meaning any changes we make in the hue saturation panel will only seep through the white holes in the stencil and affect the impossible blues.
Exactly. You have established total localized control.
Now, for the actual fix. In the hue saturation properties, we don't touch the hue slider at all. The underlying color blue is correct. It's just chemically too intense for the ink to handle. The book instructs us to subtly dial back the saturation. We gently drag the slider to the left down to a value of -14.
Saturation controls the intensity or purity of the color wavelength. By dropping it 14 points, we are essentially mixing a tiny microscopic amount of gray into those vibrant blues, dulling their intensity down just a fraction.
We also grab the lightness slider and drag it slightly to the left down to -2 to darken the blue, just a hair, pulling it further away from the glowing white point.
And how do we know if that subtle shift actually worked? What is the test?
We turn our radar back on, we go back to View Gamut Warning, and as we look at the sky, the radioactive green is gone, or at least 99% of it is gone. The colors have been gently nudged, forced back inside the boundaries of the printable CMYK world.
By executing this reduction manually using a targeted hue saturation layer, rather than letting the automated PDF conversion algorithm brutally crush the colors upon export, we have preserved the delicate visual relationships within the sky gradient.
To the human eye, it still looks like a sweeping, vibrant blue sky. It just happens to be a mathematically safe blue that physical cyan and magenta ink can actually manufacture on a press.
We have successfully rescued the file. The muddy tones are punchy, the structure is sound, the colors are chemically safe, which means we have arrived at the most critical juncture of the entire process, the point of no return.
The physical conversion.
Up until this exact moment for this entire grueling pre-press process, we have been working entirely within the RGB color mode. The file's fundamental DNA is still built out of emitted light. Now we have to actually pull the trigger and translate that DNA into physical ink. We have to convert the entire document to CMYK mode.
The material is very explicit about this timeline. You must stay in the RGB workspace to maintain flexibility until the absolute last possible minute before output. Why? Because converting mathematical data between color modes inherently causes rounding errors.
What does a color rounding error actually mean in practice?
Every single time you translate a pixel's data from an additive light model RGB to a subtractive ink model CMYK, the computer's processor has to make millions of tiny microscopic compromises to find the closest matching chemical color. The math does not perfectly align.
If you convert to CMYK early in the process, and then an hour later the art director asks for a massive color shift, and you convert the file back to RGB to make the edits easier, and then back to CMYK.
It's the classic translation problem. It's like taking a beautifully written poem in English, translating it into French, then translating that French version into German, and then translating the German back into English. By the time it gets back to English, the nuance is destroyed and the grammar is garbled.
Precisely. You permanently degrade the mathematical integrity of the file with every single conversion. It introduces digital artifacting and color banding, therefore you do all your heavy lifting, all your compositing, masking, and adjusting in the massive, forgiving mathematical space of RGB.
And you only make the traumatic jump to CMYK once, right before you generate the final print file.
The moment of truth. We go up to the menu Image Mode CMYK Color. Immediately the software throws up a scary warning prompt. It tells you that changing the color mode might cause you to lose the functionality of your adjustment layers, and it asks a critical question: do you want to merge the layers or flatten them?
And based on everything we've done, you must click Merge. As we discussed deeply during the fixing phase, adjustment layers like our surgical curves and levels rely on the underlying RGB math to calculate their effects.
If you rip the RGB foundation out from under those adjustment layers and replace it with CMYK math, the algorithms will break. The contrast will shift wildly and the image will look broken.
So clicking Merge essentially takes all those floating glass filters we built and bakes their effects permanently into the actual pixels of the layers beneath them before the conversion happens.
Right. You are finally committing to the edits. This is exactly why the very first thing we did today was save a separate working copy of the file, because you are destroying your adjustment layers here.
You always want the unmerged, fully layered RGB original safely saved on your hard drive, just in case the client suddenly decides they want the whole poster tinted yellow tomorrow.
So we take a breath and we click Merge. The software grinds for a second as the processor recalculates the math for millions of pixels. And when it is finished, if you look closely at the interface, something profound has physically changed in the Channels panel.
The Channels panel is usually tabbed right next to the Layers panel, and it is the structural X-ray of your document. Before the conversion, it showed a composite RGB channel at the top, and then 3 individual grayscale channels below it, one for red data, one for green data, and one for blue data.
Like looking at the blueprints for the 3 theater spotlights separately.
Exactly. But the moment the conversion to CMYK finishes, that panel completely transforms. The RGB channels vanish. Now it lists a CMYK composite at the top, and below it, 4 entirely new distinct channels: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black.
You are no longer looking at light data. You are now literally looking at a digital simulation of the 4 physical aluminum plates that will be bolted onto the commercial printing press. It's a simulation of wet ink.
But this profound transformation raises an incredibly important question about the software's intelligence. How does Photoshop know exactly which specific CMYK ink mixture to simulate?
Right, because as I was thinking about this, not all printers are engineered the same way. A cheap $50 plastic office printer sitting on a desk and a multi-million-dollar room-sized Heidelberg offset press cannot possibly use the exact same chemical ink formulas, the same dot patterns, or the same paper to produce the color red.
This is the most critical piece of the pre-press puzzle, and it is the exact place where amateur designers inevitably ruin their files: color management and ICC profiles.
The text explains that the color management engine deep inside Photoshop relies on ICC-compliant color profiles to mathematically convert the colors. ICC stands for the International Color Consortium.
Think of an ICC profile as a highly sophisticated, highly specific translation dictionary. It is a tiny hidden data file installed in your computer that contains a perfect mathematical description of the specific gamut, the exact physical capabilities and limitations of a specific physical device.
So if I go out and buy a high-end Epson photo printer, the software drivers come with an ICC profile that tells Photoshop exactly how that specific printer's unique cyan ink spreads on glossy photo paper.
Exactly. When you clicked Convert to CMYK a moment ago, Photoshop didn't just blindly guess the math. It relied on a default translation dictionary to make those millions of rounding decisions. But to achieve truly professional, predictable results, we have to ensure we are forcing the software to use the correct dictionary for our specific printing destination.
The material walks us through configuring this command center. We navigate to edit color settings. This opens up the brain of how Photoshop handles all color math. By default, if you just installed the program, it is set up for a digital web-first workflow,
which naturally prioritizes RGB color spaces like sRGB because that is the universal language of web browsers and mobile phone screens.
But we are printing a physical poster on a commercial press. We need to completely rewire the software's brain to prioritize paper. So in the settings drop-down menu at the top of the dialog box, we change the preset to something called North America per Press 2.
Choosing this preset instantly reconfigures a dozen hidden settings inside Photoshop's internal logic. Most importantly, it changes the default working CMYK space to a highly specific profile called US Web-Coded SWARP-v2.
SWARP-v2, that's an acronym. Specifications for Web Offset Publications.
Right. It is an incredibly common, historically standard profile used for commercial offset printing on coated glossy paper in North America. By assigning this specific profile, we are commanding Photoshop. From this moment forward, whenever you calculate CMYK values, do not guess. Assume with absolute certainty that we are printing on a standard American industrial offset press using high-quality glossy paper and run the math accordingly.
We have successfully assigned the correct translation dictionary, but the text includes a massive, screaming prerequisite warning right here. Before you ever touch ICC profiles, before you ever open the color settings dialog box, there is a physical hardware step you absolutely must take.
Monitor calibration.
Yes. The text states unequivocally if your monitor does not display colors accurately. Any color adjustments you make based on the image you see on your monitor may not be accurate.
It is the ultimate expression of garbage in garbage out in computer science.
Let's unpack the real-world consequence of this. Suppose I buy a cheap monitor and it has a slight manufacturing hardware defect where the backlight renders everything just a little bit too yellow.
Because human eyes acclimate quickly, you might not even consciously notice the yellow tint. But when you open your Paris poster, the white clouds will look slightly yellow to you. So you will unconsciously grab a curves layer and inject a bunch of blue data into the file to counteract the yellow and make the clouds look white to your eye.
The file will look perfectly beautifully neutral on my specific screen.
But the mathematical data of the file is now deeply corrupted. It is heavily oversaturated with blue. When you send that corrupted file to a perfectly calibrated $1 million commercial printer, the physical print will come out looking like it was dipped in blue dye. The printer perfectly printed the flawed data you sent it.
Because I was executing my surgical edits based on a visual lie.
Exactly. Calibrating your monitor is not optional for professionals. It usually involves purchasing a piece of hardware called a colorimeter, a small lens device you hang over your screen that reads the actual light wavelengths being emitted, and software that forces your monitor's graphics card to correct its biases and display pure mathematically neutral colors.
You must ensure that the window you are looking through is perfectly clear before you attempt to paint the landscape outside.
Okay, so we are assuming our monitor is perfectly calibrated, our file is safely converted to CMYK using the SWAP v2 translation dictionary, and the math is sound. We are finally ready to enter what might be the coolest phase of the whole process, soft proofing, looking into the future.
We have attached the dictionary, but sending a massive, complex file to a commercial press completely blind is a terrifying gamble. Soft proofing is how we mitigate that risk.
The core question is there a way we can use the math of this ICC profile to force our glowing RGB monitor to accurately simulate exactly what the dull physical printed page will look like before we spend a single dollar on real ink?
Yes. That simulation is the definition of a soft proof.
We navigate to View Proof Setup Custom. This opens the Customized Proof Condition dialog box. This is where we instruct the soft proofing system exactly which physical printer we want it to impersonate. From the Device to Simulate drop-down menu, we would normally choose the exact custom profile provided by our local print shop.
But if we don't have one, the text advises us to stick with that reliable default, working CMYK US web-coded SWAP v2.
We are commanding the screen's pixels to mimic the chemical behavior of that specific industrial press.
Now, there are a couple of crucial, highly technical checkboxes in this dialog box that we need to understand. The text says to make absolutely sure the box labeled preserve numbers is left unchecked. Why is checking that box dangerous?
If you check preserve numbers, you are issuing a very specific command to Photoshop. You are telling it to show you what the file will look like if you bypass the color management system entirely and just dump the raw, untranslated CMYK data directly into the printer.
Because the printer hasn't been given the translation dictionary, it usually misinterprets the raw data, and the resulting simulation looks wildly inaccurate and terrible. Leaving it unchecked forces the color management system to actively simulate the properly translated, corrected colors.
Next down is a drop-down for rendering intent. The instructions tell us to set this to relative colorimetric. What does a rendering intent actually do?
A rendering intent is the underlying logic algorithm the software relies on when it encounters an impossible problem during the simulation. Specifically, what is its strategy for handling a color that is fundamentally out of gamut?
Like, if the simulation determines that the printer absolutely cannot produce the glowing neon blue we left in the sky, what logic does it use to deal with that failure?
Exactly. Relative colorimetric is the standard logic used for commercial printing in North America. Its primary strategy is to compare the absolute white point of the source digital file to the white point of the destination paper.
Any colors that are safely inside the printable gamut are left completely mathematically unaltered. but the colors that are out of gamut are mapped to the absolute closest reproducible color available while strictly preserving the visual relationships between all the colors in that area.
So it ensures that a gradient still looks like a smooth gradient even if the absolute peak vibrancy of the brightest color is slightly dulled. It's a calculated compromise that sacrifices a tiny bit of absolute color accuracy to maintain the overall visual structure and harmony of the image.
Yes, it prioritizes the aesthetic relationship over the raw math.
Okay, here is where this process gets really interesting and a little bit painful. Under the section labeled Display Options on Screen, there are two checkboxes: Simulate Paper Color and Simulate Black Ink.
I call these the reality check buttons.
I checked the box for Simulate Paper Color, and immediately my beautiful, vibrant, punchy poster on the screen looks absolutely awful. The change is shocking. It suddenly looks dingy, washed out. The contrast drops significantly, and the crisp whites look sort of yellow-gray.
It looks like the poster aged 20 years in a split second. Why on earth would a professional software feature intentionally make my hard work look so much worse?
It is a genuinely shocking, sometimes depressing experience the very first time a designer clicks that box. But you have to remember the fundamental physics of light we discussed earlier. Screens are infinitely brighter than paper. Your monitor's version of white is blasting pure, unadulterated light energy directly into your eyeballs.
It is literally a light bulb shaped like a poster.
Right. But physical paper's version of white is merely passive reflection. It is inherently duller, darker, and slightly tinted by the physical wood pulp and the bleaching chemicals used to manufacture it in the mill.
Checking Simulate Paper Color forces your monitor to artificially dim its brilliant white pixels to mathematically simulate the literal, dingy physical reality of the paper stock defined by this swap-OP profile.
And what about the second box, Simulate Black Ink?
The physics apply to the shadows as well. A high-end monitor creates black by completely turning off the pixel. It is the complete and total absence of emitted light. It is pitch black. But printing ink, because of those chemical impurities we talked about, is never perfect.
Even pure K black ink printed on paper reflects a tiny bit of ambient light, making it look like a very, very dark gray when compared to a monitor's pitch black. Checking that box forces the software to artificially lift and lighten the deepest shadows on your screen to match the physical chemical limits of the wet ink on paper.
It is intentionally lowering the dynamic range of my million-color monitor to match the narrow, muddy limits of the physical world.
Soft proofing exists to temper your expectations. It brutally strips away the glowing illusion of the screen and forces you to confront the reality of the physical print. If you look at that washed-out, dingy proof on your screen and decide the lack of contrast is unacceptable for your client, you cannot fix it by just tweaking more Photoshop sliders.
If you want a brighter, punchier image in the real world, you have to change the physical parameters. You have to spend more money. You have to buy higher quality, ultra-white coated paper and premium, highly pigmented inks.
It grounds your digital design in physical reality. So we toggle the preview checkbox on and off a few times. We look at the glowing impossible RGB fantasy, and then we look at the duller CMYK reality. We accept the physical limits of our medium and we click OK. The file is structurally prepped, tonal flaws are corrected, colors are forced into gamut, it's converted to CMYK, and it's proof to reality. We are finally ready for outputting the file.
It is time to extract the data from the computer and send it to the machines.
The material walks us through saving the file specifically for a professional commercial press. We choose File Save As, but crucially, we do not save it as a standard JPEG or even a standard Photoshop PSD file. We are instructed to select a format called Photoshop EPS from the dropdown.
Display PostScript.
Why EPS? What makes that specific file architecture so special for commercial printers?
PostScript is not just an image format. It is essentially a highly complex programming language originally developed to mathematically describe the exact layout of text vector graphics and raster images on a printed page. It is the native foundational language of industrial printing presses and plate setters.
By saving your raster image as an EPS, you are effectively packaging your pixel data into a robust encapsulated format that the massive computers at the print shop can read cleanly and natively without having to run it through an error-prone translation algorithm.
And there is a critical step in the Save dialog box before we hit Confirm. We have to make absolutely sure the checkbox for ICC Profile US Web-Coded SWAP B2 is actively checked. By doing that, we are physically embedding our specific translation dictionary directly into the file's metadata.
So when the ProPress technician opens it on their end, Their software doesn't have to guess how to interpret the color numbers, it knows exactly what we expect.
We are sending the exact decoding instructions along with the raw data. It eliminates guesswork and prevents the printer from applying their own default, potentially ruinous profiles.
But just as we think we have the rules of output completely mastered, the text throws a massive mind-bending curveball. It includes a specific section dealing with desktop inkjet realities. Let's change the scenario. Let's say I'm not sending this massive poster file to an industrial offset press. Let's say I just want to print a quick 8 by 10 inch test proof on the $150 consumer Canon or HP inkjet printer sitting right on my desk.
When you switch from commercial hardware to consumer hardware, the fundamental rules of color management completely invert.
The book states clearly, if you are printing to a standard home desktop inkjet printer, you should not convert the image to CMYK.
Wait, let's unpack the logic here because my brain is breaking. I just spent an hour learning that physical printers use physical CMYK ink. I can literally open the lid of my desktop printer right now and look at the 4 physical cartridges, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Why on earth would I send a file made of RGB light data to a machine that paints with CMYK ink?
It is deeply, fundamentally counterintuitive. But it is a quirk of how consumer hardware and software drivers are engineered to function in the real world. Yes, the physical hardware of your inkjet printer uses CMYK wet inks. But the software driver, the invisible little program installed on your computer that actually commands the printer, is designed by the manufacturer to expect a standard RGB signal from your operating system.
Why would they engineer it that way?
Because 99.9% of the time, average consumers are just hitting print directly from their iPhone camera roll, or printing a picture embedded in a Microsoft Word document, or printing a web page. All of those sources are natively RGB. If the printer driver expected a CMYK file, 99% of consumer prints would fail or look corrupted.
So the manufacturer builds a tiny, highly optimized translation dictionary directly into the printer driver itself.
Exactly. The printer driver has a proprietary secret algorithmic recipe specifically tuned by the engineers to convert incoming RGB data into the absolute optimal mixture of its own specific proprietary CMYK inks.
So if I think I'm being a smart professional and I manually convert my file to CMYK in Photoshop, and then I send that mathematically complex CMYK file to my cheap desktop printer,
the printer driver gets completely confused. It is programmed to expect an RGB signal, so it takes your perfectly crafted, painstakingly separated CMYK file, and it forcefully converts the math back into RGB internally just so it can understand it. And then it runs it through its translation engine and converts it again into its own internal CMYK space before finally spraying the ink.
It's the garbled translation nightmare. English to French, French to German, German back to English.
You are forcing the data through multiple, totally unnecessary mathematical conversions, severely rounding and degrading the color values at every single step. The result is almost universally a terrible, muddy, unpredictable print. For consumer inkjets, the golden rule is stay in RGB, make sure you choose the correct paper type in the printer's dialog box, like selecting glossy photo paper, so the driver knows precisely how much ink to spray without causing dot gain, and let the printer's internal brain do the heavy mathematical lifting.
That is a mind-blowing workflow tip that will save so many freelance designers so much grief and wasted expensive photo paper. You only execute the manual conversion to CMYK if you are dealing with a true professional press environment.
Or, as the material carefully notes, if you happen to have a specialized, high-end professional desktop printer equipped with an Adobe PostScript RIP.
RIP stands for Raster Image Processor.
Right. It is essentially a piece of software that acts as a mini commercial press brain living inside a desktop unit. It bypasses the dumb consumer driver and allows you to send raw CMYK data directly to the print heads.
And if you do have a RIP, or if you're preparing to send the file to a commercial plate setter, there's one final verification step you can take. You can print color separations to double-check the mechanical integrity of your file.
Printing separations is the ultimate, undeniable physical proof that your file is built correctly.
The text explains that when a massive commercial offset press prints a CMYK image, it obviously does not print all the colors simultaneously out of a single moving nozzle like a desktop inkjet does. It prints using 4 massive, separate, distinct physical aluminum plates. One plate rolls only cyan ink onto the paper moves down the line, the next plate rolls magenta ink precisely on top of it, and so on.
They layer the inks on top of each other at incredibly high speeds to chemically build the full color optical illusion.
We can simulate this exact mechanical process on a PostScript-enabled desktop printer. When we go to Print and the Print dialog box under the color handling menu, we change the setting from the default normal printing to separations.
And because our digital poster is 11 by 17 inches, but our desktop printer probably only holds standard 8.5 by 11 inch letter paper, we absolutely have to check the box for scale to fit media.
Otherwise, it would just print the top left corner of the Eiffel Tower 4 times. So we scale it down, we choose separations, and we hit print. And what the printer spits out is fascinating. It doesn't print one full-color mini poster. It spits out 4 individual, entirely black and white pieces of paper.
It is a profound visual learning experience to look at these sheets. If you pick up the piece of paper labeled cyan, there is absolutely no blue ink on it. It is printed entirely in black ink. The black ink merely represents the physical density of where the blue ink will go on the final press. The darker the black shade on the separation plate, the heavier the cyan ink coverage will be in that specific area.
You can physically hold the yellow sheet up to the light and see exactly how much yellow ink is being used to build the warm tones in the sky gradient. Or, more importantly, you can check the black sheet, the K plate, to ensure your tiny black typography is only printing on that one single plate.
If you look at the separations and realize your sharp black text is actually being built by a muddy, fuzzy mixture of cyan, magenta, and yellow plates stacking on top of each other,
you know immediately that your text will look blurry and terrible in the final print, and you have to go back into the file and fix your color swatches. Separations act as a structural X-ray of your design logic. It allows you to verify the mechanical integrity of the file's architecture before it ever reaches the expensive plate setter.
we have officially survived the pre-press gauntlet. The file is separated, it's saved as an EPS with the profile embedded, and it's completely ready for the commercial press. But our journey isn't quite over. The material provides one final, crucial chapter, an extra credit section focused on sharing the portfolio.
Because realistically, what good is mastering the dark arts of professional print prep if potential art directors and clients can't easily see the stunning results of your work?
Exactly. This is the career building phase. We need to take this massive high-resolution CMYK print masterpiece and figure out how to get it onto the internet.
Which requires us to completely reverse almost every single technical decision we just spent the last hour making.
The very first instruction in this section is paramount. The book says, do not use the CMYK EPS file you just made. Go back to your hard drive and open the 14start.psd file, the original untouched file. Why must we go backward?
Because that original file is still in the RGB color mode. The text explicitly reminds us that the RGB mathematical space contains a vastly wider color gamut. It still possesses the data for those glowing electric blues and neon pinks that we spend so much painful effort crushing down and dulling into the CMYK space for physical ink.
Right. If our goal is to prepare a file to be viewed purely on a digital monitor, like on a portfolio website, we want to utilize that wider RGB gamut. Digital monitors are capable of emitting those gorgeous colors. If we uploaded our dull, mathematically compromised CMYK version to the web, the browser would struggle to interpret it, and it would look artificially washed out and terrible on the screen.
The golden rule of media preparation: always match the color space to the native physical environment of the final destination. A screen destination demands an RGB source file.
So we open the massive original RGB file. But we have a new problem. It's 300 ppi and 11 by 17 inches. It's a huge data file. If we try to upload that raw file to a portfolio website, it will take a user 10 minutes to download, and it will be physically larger than their screen.
So you have to optimize the data for digital delivery.
We navigate to File, Export, Export As. This brings up a web optimization dialog box. First, we choose the JPEG format. JPEG uses a lossy compression algorithm, which means it intelligently discards invisible data to vastly shrink the file size, making it perfect for rapid internet loading. We set the quality slider to about 90% to ensure the architectural details of the Eiffel Tower remain visually crisp without bloating the file size.
But the absolute critical step here is scaling the physical pixel dimensions of the image.
The text instructs us to go to the image size section of the dialog box and enter 18% into the scale field. It explicitly notes that shrinking the image to 18% proportionally resizes the vertical height of the poster down to exactly 918 pixels.
Why that specific number? Why 918 pixels?
It's a UX decision, user experience. The standard resolution height of most common laptop displays is 1080 pixels. By sizing our vertical poster to 918 pixels high, we ensure that when an art director clicks on our image, The entire vertical poster can be viewed at 100% crisp magnification on their screen at once without them having to frustratingly scroll up and down to see the typography at the bottom. We are designing for the user's viewing experience.
And then we have to execute the final critical color management step for the internet, embedding the correct web profile.
Down in the color space section of the export dialog, we ensure two specific checkboxes are ticked. Convert to sRGB and embed color profile.
sRGB is the universal lowest common denominator color space for the entire internet. It was designed to represent the average color capabilities of a standard cheap computer monitor. Almost every web browser, every mobile phone operating system, and every tablet assumes an incoming image is formatted in sRGB unless it is specifically told otherwise.
It's the default translation dictionary for the internet. By proactively converting our massive RGB file down into the smaller sRGB space and embedding that profile into the JPEG, we ensure that the vibrant colors we perfected on our expensive calibrated studio monitor will look reasonably consistent and accurate even when a client views our portfolio on a cheap, uncalibrated smartphone screen while sitting on a bus.
You are managing the translation for the digital space just as carefully as you managed it for the physical press.
So we hit export. We now possess a lightweight, perfectly color-managed, web-safe JPEG. The final step of the material walks us through building the actual portfolio webpage to house it. It demonstrates using Adobe Portfolio, which is a platform integrated directly into the Creative Cloud ecosystem.
It is engineered for incredibly rapid deployment of a professional presence without requiring coding knowledge.
You literally just open a web browser, go to myportfolio.com, sign in with your credentials, and click a big Get Started button. The user interface is highly visual and intuitive. You scroll through a gallery of pre-built, aesthetically pleasing layouts. The material uses a theme called Lena as its example, which features a very clean, minimalist, center-aligned aesthetic that puts the focus entirely on the artwork.
You do not need to understand a single line of HTML or CSS infrastructure to build this.
Not one line. You click an Add Content button, choose to create a new page, and give it a title like Visit Paris Campaign. Then you click a Files button, locate the optimized 918 pixel JPEG we just exported on your hard drive and upload it. The Adobe backend server automatically processes the image and drops it perfectly into the center of the web page.
The platform handles all the complex backend responsive scaling, ensuring the image container flexes correctly depending on the browser window size.
We add a brief caption using the floating text tool, something professional like poster created for the Visit Paris tourism campaign, and theoretically we are done. But my absolute favorite feature that the material highlights is the integrated preview function.
The multi-device preview is essential for modern web design.
Yes. Down at the very bottom of the portfolio interface, there is a row of small icons shaped like different pieces of hardware. A wide desktop monitor, a tablet turned sideways, a tablet turned vertically, and a smartphone. You can click the smartphone icon, and the editing interface instantly reshapes itself to show you exactly, pixel for pixel, how your portfolio page will look if an art director loads it on their iPhone.
It allows you to verify that your typography remains legible and that your vertical poster scales correctly and doesn't break the layout when viewed on a narrow vertical screen.
It's another form of soft proofing just for web hardware instead of paper. Once you click through the devices and verify the layout is unbreakable, you just hit the green Publish Slate button. And the text notes, one final brilliant career-building integration upon publishing portfolio offers to push your newly created project page directly over to Behance.
Behance is the massive global social network specifically built for creative professionals. Pushing your project there instantly inserts your work into a searchable algorithm, putting it in front of thousands of art directors, agency recruiters, and peer designers. It elegantly bridges the gap between the isolated technical act of prepping a file and the vital business act of marketing yourself to the industry.
And just like that, we have completed the entire exhaustive journey. We have taken a massive, multi-layered, mathematically complex RGB file. We diagnosed its flaws, mapped its impossible colors, and forced it through the brutal physics of CMYK chemical translation. We simulated dingy paper to temper our expectations, output the raw data to physical separation plates, and finally optimized the original light data to publish a flawless digital portfolio to the entire world.
It is a comprehensive end-to-end professional journey. If we synthesize every single concept we have dissected today, the core philosophy really boils down to one word: control. Understanding the fundamental physical difference between emitted light energy in RGB and subtracted light energy in CMYK. Utilizing diagnostic tools like the gamut warning and clipping masks to surgically rescue rogue pixels. leveraging ICC profiles to act as flawless translation dictionaries between devices, simulating the harsh realities of paper with soft proofing.
It is about understanding exactly what the underlying math and the physical machines are doing at every step so that the algorithms never make critical aesthetic decisions on your behalf.
Exactly. True professionalism in design is the rigorous management of translation.
I want to leave you with a final thought experiment based on the physics we've explored today. As modern humans, we spend the vast majority of our waking lives staring at glowing screens. We are constantly bombarded by additive emitted RGB light. It is so ubiquitous, so perfect, that we easily forget that in the physical tactile world, color is actually a messy chemical reaction. It is merely ink absorbing specific wavelengths of light and bouncing the leftovers back into our eyes. The next time you walk down the street and look at a high-end, glossy magazine cover on a newsstand, or you look up at a massive, faded billboard baking in the afternoon sun, I want you to step up close to it. Try to imagine the millions of microscopic overlapping cyan, magenta, yellow, and black dots that are mechanically working together to build that image.
Try to see past the illusion of the continuous tone.
Ask yourself, are you looking at the exact vibrant colors the original designer saw glowing on their monitor? Or are you just looking at the physical chemical limits of the ink budget they could afford? It fundamentally changes how you see the visual world around you. Keep discovering, keep looking closely at the details, and keep asking why. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.